You're building your wealth, but you're not protecting it. And so the government takes your money and do whatever they want with it. We don't want that. So today we're going to talk about how to protect your wealth. Now, on this channel, we talk a lot about building your wealth and, just how to use the stock market, bonds, and all different avenues, real estate, different ways to build your wealth. But a lot of things, or a lot of times, we neglect to talk about protecting our wealth. And so today I'm going to dive in because it's a very important conversation for us to have, but a lot of time we neglect this. And so, God forbid, we all have to go someday. And let's say we pass on. What happens to this wealth that we're building? What happens with our family? What's going to happen there? And so that's what I want to dive into today. So, we all know or we've heard about having a will. Well, let's see what happens when you don't have a will. When you don't have a will, chaos happens. You pass on and no will in place. Well, the government just does whatever he or she wants to do. And your family fights over your assets. And, nobody's happy. You might be, some people might use the term turn in your grave a little bit because your family, your friends, whoever is fighting over your assets. And we don't want that. So, the worst case scenario, and I'm going to say worse, but you have to hear me out as to why I say this. The worst case scenario is you don't have a will. The next best thing is you do get a will. Right after that, though, on top of that, the really best thing to do to protect your assets is to get a trust. Now, there are many different types of trust, but in this video, I'm not going to talk about the different types of trusts. I'm going to talk about the difference between why you should not stop at a will and why you should get a trust instead. And I'm going to kind of break down the process of getting a will because I've done all of this. So I'm going to break down the process because it was a little bit daunting for me. But at the end of the day, you want peace. You want peace among your family. You want peace among just, once you go, you want just peace. Okay. I've seen and heard so many different stories. And I talk about this in my book, A Toolkit for Raising Wealthy Kids. So many stories about when family members pass on, how families are fighting over assets. And we don't want that to be you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to talk to you about the difference between a will and a trust. So remember, I said the first best thing is to get a will. Yes, we have to get a will. And a will is good, right? It's going to be good because you will be writing down, and it's easy to write a will. You can literally write on a piece of paper what your desire is for your assets, who's to get this, and how you want to split that. That's perfectly fine. That is, as long as you sign it and you're in your right mind, that's good. But there's also different websites that are like freewill.com. I'm going to link those below that you can literally just go and get a free will. But you want to have something in place first, because nobody knows what you're thinking. Nobody knows what you want. And you might, no, I'm not going to even say that. I was going to say I have somebody on the side. We're not going to talk about that. Right. But you don't know. And so just write it down in some way, make it where, at the end of the day, somebody will be able to find it so they can translate and fulfill what your desire is. But let's talk about the will and, how that translate. So when you get a will, what happens here and the possibilities that happen when you get a will, right? The government may freeze your asset. Okay. Govern. Let me just put that. The government may freeze your asset. And this is not good, right? But at least you have something in place. It's not an absolute that the government will freeze your asset. It's just a possibility, right? And so it's not actually may. They will freeze your asset because what's going to happen, let me change that to will freeze your asset, because what's going to happen is your assets are going to go through probate court. This is a must. Once you have a will, your assets are going to go through probate court. And this will take, listen, anywhere from maybe 1 to 2 years. And so let's hope you don't have kids, because if you have kids, and this is, especially for those of us who have kids, if they're young, make sure you have a will. Click the link below and get that free will, because they're going to be tied up in all of this mess. You would think that the government will just be like, hey, their kids, we should make sure we give the guardian the full assets. No, 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 it doesn't go like that. And that's why you have to make sure you make it a priority to write down the things or what you want to happen once you pass on, and don't wait until you're in your 50s. Nobody knows the day or time. The sooner the better, especially if you have kids. Nobody knows the date or the time, because I remember my brother telling me about a friend of his who passed on his way home from the barber, and his wife was pregnant. They just got married. Nobody knows the date or time. You want to have something in place. Anyways, so if you have a will, though, I mean, again, that's the first step. I cannot emphasize this enough. Though it has all of these different things that, are possible to happen, at least you have something in place. So we know your desire. The world knows your desire of what you want for your kids, your wife, and whatever the case may be. So let's continue. So, right, probate court takes 1 to 2 years. Now, the process of going through probate court is going to cost you. Well, not you, but the average legal process, it will cost about 1 to 5% of your asset. Okay. And more than it would if you were to have a trust. And so another thing with your will, all information is public. I hear about different celebrities where their divorce is public and stuff like that. Who wants their stuff to be public, right? All information is public. And so we don't want that. And then your beneficiaries do not have 100% control. Let me bring this up a little bit for us, right? Your beneficiaries do not have 100% control, right? And so the probate court with that is going to tell, well, what happens to your assets, right? Probate court tells what happens to your assets, even though you wrote it down. And so, listen, we have to get it right. And maybe I'll have to do the trust and then break it down, in the future video, because this might be a little bit long-winded. But yeah, the probate court tells this is what's going to happen after all is said and done. The court is going to decide what happens. And then somebody, like my lawyer said, anyone can object. You may say, okay, let me come on camera to kind of talk about this here. Right. Now, you may say, well, I wrote it down. This is what it is. Nobody's going to, interfere. John from down the street could be somebody who cuts your grass. Okay. And John can raise his hand and say, hey, I wasn't in the will. She promised me, or he promised me, that he was going to give me the Lambo. I don't know if you have a Lambo, he was going to give me the guest house. He was going to, whatever the case, they can raise their hand and say, hey, this will isn't right. This was supposed to be updated. I was supposed to be included, but you're not here to justify that. You're not here to say that's correct or not. And so we're in probate court a little bit longer because somebody raised their hand and objected. So anyone can object to what you write down on that piece of paper or even on freewill.com. And so what this means is you have no protection. Right. And this is really about it, but you have no protection from anyone coming in, predators, and stuff like this coming in to decide, hey, I want some of that money. I want some of that moolah. And so it's going to be very important that you get a trust. And so for the interest of the time of this video, I don't want to really emphasize the trust because it's already almost 10 minutes. But this is some of the cons of getting just a will. But I will say it is, let me go over this again. It is still a good idea to get a will because can you imagine if you don't have anything at all in place? If you don't have anything at all in place, listen, If you have kids, get it together. So some of the things we said is when you get a will, right? The government will freeze your assets. Okay, let me put that here. It's supposed to say assets. ASS. You know what I'm trying to say. Okay. The government will freeze your assets. And then we are going to probate court, right? So freeze assets, then we go to probate court. Probate court will take a while. And one of the things with probate court taking a while, it's going to cost some money because you got to pay lawyers, you got to pay, people who are in the court doing all these things, fighting on your behalf. So yeah, that's going to happen. And your information is public. Who wants people in their business? I don't. Okay, your information is public. And the judge is going to have the final say. Okay, the government will have the final say. And people can come out of nowhere and object to what you say in your will, right? Who wants that? But I will say, at least have the will, because maybe nobody objects. Maybe, you have the will, goes to probate court, no issue. I remember hearing, I don't know how true this is, but I heard this through the grapevine, social media, when a famous celebrity passed. I don't know if it's Kobe, but his wife couldn't get her hands on his assets because he didn't have a trust. I don't know what the situation was, but she had to go through probate court, took some of her money, took some of her, you took some time. Okay. So please, 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 as we're building our wealth, consider at least put in your assets in a will. Okay. If not a will, the next best thing is, if you don't have a will, or if a trust is going to be expensive, I will say that, but at least have a will, even though it has all these cons. The pro here is that you will have something in place. So we already, people will already know the starting point of what it is that you desire. But if you have nothing, nobody knows what you want. If you have all these assets, I don't even know what happens. Okay, so let's not have that, especially if you have little ones. Okay, please, 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 at least get your free will. That's the first step. And then we'll talk about trust in our next video. All right. Now, if you are on this channel enjoying this video and enjoying the content, please like, share, and subscribe. On this channel, the aim is to bridge the wealth gap. And the way to do that is to just spread knowledge. And so it starts with you. And so if there's anybody who you know, especially if they have kids, for this video particularly, share this video with them and share this sequence with them, because I'm going to be talking about the trust as well. And so that we can protect our babies, because again, you never know the hour or the minute. Until next time.